Welcome to Hip Hop Now Podcast. If you're from the future, you know what to do. Get your ass out of here. Don't disrespect the legend. Hip hop is here to stay. Let's get right into the business. What up, y'all? I am your host, Vegas, and this is Hip Hop Now Podcast, a podcast specifically designed to keep you caught up on all things hip hop, music, and culture that happened throughout the week. Happy New Year to you. If you don't know, we did a show for 2025. It was the preview show, the annual preview show. We do it every year where I talk about some of my wants and things are highly anticipated as far as projects. So if you haven't had the opportunity to check that out, whether it's in audio form or right here on YouTube, please do so. It's some interesting things there, and don't act surprised when they happen, okay? Because I've already talked about them. We do this every year. But nevertheless, big shout out to all the subscribers of the podcast on audio form, those who have been listening for years, whether it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever. But big shout out to all the new subscribers to the channel on YouTube, Hip Hop Now Podcast, that joined in recent times, because December, the channel had a big uh, boost. The goal for 2024 was to hit 500 subscribers, and if I hit 500, get to 1,000, and we are around 1,600 subscribers right here on YouTube, which is excellent. The next goal is 5,000, so we have a long way to go. So keep in mind, if you're new here and you like the content, whether it's coming from the long form content, short form content, and even shorter, as in shorts, subscribing to the channel and supporting the channel in that way is just one of the ways you can support. Obviously, you could also support on CashApp, because we don't have Patreon anymore, to support the production of the podcast. You can hit the Cash App. The QR code is right here on the screen, but it's also located, or my tag or my name or whatever is located in the description, and maybe it's on the screen. I don't remember if I put it on yet, but who knows, in the future, it'll be there. Okay. But big shout out to hiphopdx.com, allhiphop.com, Double XL Mag, and a couple of places where I get the stories from. Let's get right into the business. So right at the top of the year, gifts just got unwrapped. Tree was still up. We're about to toast to the new year. And real quick, because I didn't say it in the intro, I also want to send my condolences out to those people who are going through the wildfires in LA, which is just terrible. It just looks terrible. You see all the houses burning. So hopefully people have evacuated and are safe, and try to find a way to rebuild. Hopefully a lot of people donate and help people kind of get back some of the normalcy they used to have before, fire hit their home or hit their neighborhood or whatever. So peace to them. What wasn't fire, in my opinion? Joey Badass put out a freestyle at the very beginning of the year. Essentially, it was called The Rule Is Back, essentially planting his flag for 2025. But in doing that, lyrically, he did two things that stood out to most hip hop heads, and not necessarily in a positive way. Sparked some debate, but also a little bit of negativity. And maybe it was just for the sport, because I haven't seen anything too crazy. But the two things that he touched on that really started it was the fact that, one, he said too much West Coast licking. All right. It's a family podcast. I'm not going to say the word, but those who know, that line originally came from Jay-Z on Reasonable Doubt, his first album, 22 Twos. And the other line was him saying he loved the East Coast, which isn't a big deal, but also claiming he's the king of New York. Now, I am from Brooklyn, New York, born and raised. I lived in other places, not on the West Coast, but I've traveled to the West Coast. I'm a big fan of West Coast hip hop from the early 90s and some of it today. So for me as a fan, I really don't have an East Coast bias because my hip hop palette has always been varied. But as one would think, that would ruffle some feathers for him to say some of those things. The West Coast part more than the King of New York, um, mainly because he's clearly talking about Kendrick and inadvertently talking about the year the West Coast had. Like if you looked at my top five of the year, I think it was three. Yeah, it was three West Coast albums in there, and that just happened to be the type of year 2024 was. It wasn't planned. It's what the West Coast did. They put in work, and a lot of people had, like Snoop and Dr. Dre or Kendrick or even the Dog Pound in their best albums of the year. And then there were other West Coast artists, like from TDE and all of that, who dropped very dope records. So 2024 was the West Coast year. Well, obviously the West Coast responded. Ray Vaughn, who is a TDE artist, if you didn't know, responded rapping over Kendrick's "The Heart Part 6" with some nice bars. You know what I'm saying? And he basically, the name of his freestyle is "Crash Out Heritage," and his rebuttal to Joey Fat. I was good. I was getting ready to say Joey Fat Ass. Like pause. We don't know. But to Joey Badass was more so about you tiptoeing around the names and stuff. Well, I'm gonna just be direct. And it was a cool response. And I think also Daylight, for those who know battle rap, also responded with a record. Honestly, when I heard this from Joey Badass's freestyle, "The Rule Is Back," as a fan of Joey Badass, as a born and raised New Yorker, I didn't necessarily like it because I think I get the energy where Joey Badass is coming from, right? Like he's released music. He hasn't released music in a little while, but he's released music to, let's just say, light fanfare. And I don't mean like he's like an underground rapper, meaning like he has a mainstream eye on him. He just doesn't do the numbers, and he doesn't get the same attention as a Kendrick, a Drake, a J. Cole when he drops, right? People like there's some noise like, oh, Joey Badass got something new. People check it out, but it's never really like hoopla. So he's trying to plant his flag. The thing I don't like about it is in 2025, with social media and so many people willing to believe more misinformation than the information that's true, and people who want to be attached to drama, and I'm even talking about content creators, you get a situation where we're not dealing with people paying attention to what's real and what's not, right? Like, did he mean it as a whole slap to the West Coast? Maybe he did. Maybe he meant it in a way we couldn't really figure out. But the issue with that is we only going to take it the way it seems. And if people don't even know where that line comes from, the line about, too much West Coast licking, then they just going to take it for what it is because that's what it means. What else would it mean? And I kind of felt like it was hating on, on a year that the West Coast had. It's not like the West Coast had hip hop for like decades and now New York want to take it back and they're going to take it back in this way. Nah, man, this was like a resurgence of the West Coast having uh the public's ear and eye on everything they were doing. And it just happened. And I feel what Joey Badass is trying to do, he's trying to pop out and say he's nice too, but it wasn't like the bars were that crazy. It was just controversial. You know what I'm saying? And to me, the best way to pop out, and this probably speaks to what what he was thinking about when he did this is just to drop something crazy at the beginning of the year that everybody loves, and then all the attention goes on you in that way, like an admiration type thing. And instead, now you have the worst thing you would want for somebody who wants to gain admiration. Nobody's going to give you admiration when we've been celebrating West Coast hip hop resurgence, and you turn around and say it ain't all that, basically. You know what I'm saying? Like, yo, y'all need to chill. It's not that. It's not me. It's the king of New. I'm the king of New York. And it just sounds crazy, to say that. Um, so I'm kind of glad it feels like it's dying down at least a little bit. I hope it goes away. I think it will, because the difference between Kendrick and Drake going at it is you have two major pillars in the music game going back and forth. People are paying attention. There's like people are into it. It's the matchup. But when Joey Badass is considered to some people several tiers down, I don't believe he needs to be that low, but it is what it is. People are easy. They can dismiss you easily. As soon as they hear like, who said that? Oh, he said it. They can be very dismissive of anything you say, even if how you said it was dope or you had bars and all of that. It's the type of game you play today when you pop out like that, right? So I kind of felt like it should have been a very dope song, or maybe he should have exposed like why he felt like that more than anything, right? Like why do you feel this way? Not metaphorically, tell us directly in detail why. The thing about the King of New York thing, it's definitely not you, because even though I thought his last album, I think it was called 2000, I liked it, but it didn't shift the culture. And maybe that's why he's mad, right? Maybe he hasn't been getting his respect because he released a couple of singles, some of which people didn't like, some people really like. He did a guest feature on Conway the Machine's album that was really dope. I mean, I think his bars on that was better than his freestyle by a long shot. And I think he just wants that attention because he feels like, yo, I'm nice too, which is cool. But let the West Coast have their time, man. Like the South been holding on to hip hop for a long time. It was like the first time in a long time we was just hearing you, not that it went away, but we were just hearing like another sound dominate the radio. You know what I'm saying? So, and he could have been talking to, like, see, this is where you mess up and you leave people to interpret what you were doing and your intentions and all that. He could have been talking about New Yorkers specifically, or radio in New York. In the same way Ice Cube was saying when they were dissing New York, they were dissing, the guys that controlled radio and media and all of that. But the problem with that was back then they were generalizing, so it sounded like they were just dissing anything from New York, including the people. And it's the same thing here with Joey Badass. If he's talking about, yo, I'm putting out these joints and I'm from New York, and the New York media or the New York radio stations, they're not even covering my stuff like that. They're not playing my song like that. But they every day I gotta hear them playing everything from the West Coast. Well, to me, it's not the West Coast fault. Now it would have been better. It would have been way. If he wanted to grab the attention, he should have went all in on that. If that's why he said what he said. But instead, now it feels like East Coast versus West Coast light, like the vegan version of that, which wasn't really East Coast versus West Coast thing to begin with, because the media kind of hyped that whole thing up and made people feel like they had to respond or be on guard and stuff like that. So I just wish he'd move on. I like Joey Badass. I look forward to when he drops new albums. I think American Badass is one of the most slept on hip hop albums of all time because of timing, and maybe because To Pimp a Butterfly was also out talking about some similar things that it grabbed all the attention. But this ain't the way to do it, Joey. Not for me, but who knows? What do y'all think? Leave your comments in the comment section below. Mac Miller, if you listen to this podcast for more than just today, you will know that I wasn't the biggest Mac Miller fan. It had nothing to do with him personally. Obviously, this is not something to speak ill of the dead. This is just saying what I've always said when the man was here. I wasn't that much of a fan. I didn't see the hype in him, and it was only because there were so many artists similar in style and delivery and even voice to him around the time he was like hot, or just even out. That it wasn't just him. There was just certain individuals I was like, yo, am I listening to J. Cole or I'm listening to Logic? You know what I'm saying? And I picked J. Cole because it was just too many similarities in the MCs. But I know, people love Mac Miller. He seemed like a cool dude, definitely a hip hop head. When you had the admiration of the underground from the commercial artists and all of that. Uh, but he passed away unfortunately, and he's had a couple, I think one or two, maybe one posthumous album since he passed, and he has one coming up called Balloonerism, and the first single just dropped called $5 Pony Rides. So I gave it a listen because honestly, I'm always intrigued by the popularity of certain artists, right? Like I want to see why they like them. And when I look at the fans and what they say, sometimes that I become a fan because I'm like, oh, I never looked at it like that. And now I'm listening with a different set of ears versus somebody, a fan might say, oh, they talk that slick talk. And I listen, I'm like, nah, I don't hear that at all. This person don't deserve their spot. So it's not like I don't like any Mac Miller songs. I just never been a fan enough to be like hyped for albums. But I'm curious about this one in particular because they've been talking about it for a while. The first single really fills that lane of what I just said. A couple of guys do this thing, right? Do this flow, have this cadence, and it's more of a sing-songy rhyming type of song. To me, I think it's cool. Honestly, it's what I think Drake should just go back to doing instead of bringing up the battle every 5 minutes. Like you lost, dog. This is what we want, a mood, a vibe, or whatever. But I don't know if the rest of the album will sound like this. They released the track listing for Balloonerism, and there's a couple of features on here. I know Scissor's on here. Who else? I don't know who Delusional Thomas is. Uh, and some others I heard that was supposed to be a part of this project. So I'm curious, and I think for the first single, if you were a Mac Miller fan, you probably like it. If you're a fan of a certain Mac Miller, because I do like Mac Miller when he gets super into the hip hop mode, like almost the boom bap mode. But this is more on the commercial side of flows and sounds and stuff like that. And I kind of dig it, but I'm curious to see what the album is going to sound like because you just never know with these singles. Sometimes it's not even worth listening to the singles because you could like hate a single, hit an album, and then like that single within the context of the album. So we'll see when it drops. I'll definitely review it on this page, on this podcast. But what do you think about Mac Miller's latest single? Are you a Mac Miller fan? Are you looking forward to this album? Leave your comments in the comment section below. And lastly, all right, so this is nothing new at all at this point when it comes to hip hop and social media. And in a lot of ways, social media and the culture and the conversations spill out into the real world. There was a time where you could just say, that's just on Twitter. Yeah, but that was in a group chat on Facebook. Yeah, nobody believes that, but that was there. Out here is different. Well, now it's not really that because now some of these hip hop hot takes happen so frequently about the same topics a lot of times that they always spill out into the real world and people start to question, is such and such better than such and such? Like I saw one dude say, and he had made a video. Someone sent it to me, made a video and said, A Tribe Called Quest is overrated. And then he went on to break down their lines in songs, in like check the rhyme and songs that scenario, and say how simplistic and how like lines lacked meaning and stuff like that. And when I saw that, I was like, wow, he was inside back then, or he wasn't born. Because if you paid any attention to hip hop back in the early 90s, specifically East Coast hip hop, the lyrics were always like playful. It was about wordplay. It wasn't about this has to make sense to connect to that that was like 94 and on. That was like Illmatic and on when you had to do stuff like that. But before that with like Daylight, and not to say that everybody was rapping nonsense, but a song like Blue Cheese, a song like, which is later, like Lucchini, right? You can't, the hook makes sense, but the verses are just wordplay. And he couldn't understand that that's hip hop also. It's not, everything is not about a deep sense of meaning to say that this person is great, right? It was about the vibe, like you guys say. So I felt it funny that somebody would say that, but I've seen all stuff like Twitter just loves to take Big L and push him ahead of so many other people who've had more albums, more accolades, more classic material, debatably even better lyrically. And I don't know why. And some will say because he is. But that was never a conversation when Big L was here. Big L was trying to get where Nas and Biggie and Jay-Z where they were. He was trying to get there. Some of it was label mess, and unfortunately, when he got the proper label situation, he was murdered. So he never really got to do what those guys did. So you got to work with the material that's left. And unfortunately, it's a lot of freestyles. It's a debut album that even when it debuted, it wasn't one of the greater albums in hip hop. It was cool, but it wasn't better than Illmatic. It wasn't better than Ready to Die. It wasn't better than Reasonable Doubt, right? And then he got the which also I think dropped. It dropped after he passed the Flamboyant joint. The what is it, the Big Picture? So Big L never really got an opportunity to launch for real. He had his moment, didn't pan out, but now he was getting a better shot at it this time, and he had momentum. But if you let social media tell it, he's better than all of them. He should be above most of them in top fives, top tens, or whatever. And of course, it's okay if that's your personal take, right? If you love Big L that much and he connects with you that much, of course he's in your top five or top three. But if we speak in generally, which is what's getting lost in the hot take culture, the general consensus is not just you. The general consensus is not just your friends, not just your city. It's, can you go in most places and people from different areas will consider that a classic? Like, yo, that album is a classic. I'm from LA. That album is a classic. I'm from South Carolina. I'm from North Dakota. I'm from Brooklyn. I'm from Philly. Universally. So, universally speaking, rappers like, Big L weren't considered top five, when it came to the best artists of all time, the greatest MCs of all time. Most people didn't feel that way. Some people didn't even hear some of Big L's material. You know what I'm saying? But it's the same thing with Tribe. You don't get to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame because only Queens, New York, or only New York likes them. No, they're universally accepted as one of the greatest hip hop groups of all time. And then for people to make videos as if everybody else is blind or brainwashed or been told, and I'm here to free your minds by telling you they're not as good as you think they are, that's stupid. Because people knew why they liked those records. Now you telling them you didn't really like it the way you thought you should because they're not really that good. So this happens all the time on social media. And I think in a lot of ways, it is ruining hip hop because the further you go with people having hot takes that they believe in, some of it's not even trolling, they believe, the less the people who have been defending the honor of those individuals, songs, albums that are sacred, that generally liked and loved in hip hop, the more that narrative of nah, it's not that good starts to take over because they got all the energy because they got something to prove. Whereas we sit around like, isn't this a known fact? Right? Isn't it a known fact that Ludacris is nice, but he's not Nas? That's not known. That's not common knowledge in the hip hop space. And to those who don't really get in these circles to even see some of this stuff, and I know you're wondering, well, why would they say that? Because social media gives you a way to pretend that, for one, you're knowledgeable about things you may not be that knowledgeable about. And the reason why you feel that way or encouraged is because the internet, you can find thousands of people who think just like you, which you feel like validates your take on them. Well, I got 1,000 likes. I must be right about it. No, no. It's the same thing with getting rid of the thumbs down, right? Some people abuse the thumbs down on certain sites like YouTube, so they kind of got rid of it, or at least rid of you seeing it. So now you see the likes and people just go forward with that. So I really don't like the hot take culture. Most of the time I don't respond to the nonsense, especially as it relates to times I know I lived through. I know where, like, I wasn't even in my own city and I saw it where I was when I was younger, and I saw it, in New York when I would come home from college. And to me, there was no better sign of, oh yeah, this joint hot everywhere. So I don't know. I did a show a while back called Hip Hop Twitter because the hip hop takes were so ridiculous. I thought it was entertaining until I realized it would never die. And I would just be getting angry all the time. And that's not what I want to do. So, what do you think about hip hop takes and it potentially ruining hip hop culture as far as the perception of greats and great music and what's hot and what isn't and what's a classic and what isn't, and true lyricists like Coogee Rap almost never popping up in people top tens because they don't know hip hop? That's going to do it for me. You can follow me on anywhere on social media at Vegas World INC, and subscribe to the podcast on any and probably all audio podcasting apps. And if you are watching or listening for the first time and maybe you haven't become a subscriber to the YouTube channel. For the audio listeners, the link is in the description. If you like this content so much, then subscribe, hit the like button, comment. I read the comments, but most importantly, share with people you know would like. this kind of content. Until next time, y'all, I'm not a critic, I'm a fan. Peace.